Everything's on airplane.
So we're on live. Thank you for the coffee.
You're welcome.
And let's get started. Hi, welcome to the world according to the NAS man. Today I'm with Faisal again, best friend, psychiatrist, fascinating conversationalist. As
How do you do?
always.
Yes, and bon vivant and anecdotal person.
See, I don't even know what those things mean. So today we had a bit of a plan to speak about cognitive distortions.
Yes,
basically.
and I'm using this as a platform to actually push some of the lines that I use with patients, and one of my favorite ones is don't should yourself to death.
Okay, I like that one. We can go two routes. We can start with, destroying the example that you said, the witty remark. Or we can just kind of dissect it and then probably come back to it later.
Yeah.
So I'll interject with shoulds, and shoulds is something that I remember intimately from my training. I had a British trainer in hypnosis who said you got to get rid of the lazms. And the lazms are the shoulds. I should this, I should that, he should this, he should that.
Exactly.
Etc. etc. So maybe a bit of your take on this, since you gave us you shouldn't shoot yourself. You shouldn't don't should yourself to death.
Don't shoot yourself to death.
Don't shoot yourself to death.
So he mentioned the word cognitive distortions, and that's how we sometimes call these things. Cognitive distortions are certain rules that we live by that tend to kind of unfortunately paint the world in a more anxiety-filled way or a more depressive way. It's the thing that makes us feel like we're not doing enough, or we're not happy for a reason, and this is the reason. Even though we've distorted really reality enough, we've just made differences. And I can give a better example than this, which is, why is it called the shoulds rule? Because there are only two types of shoulds, really. Either you're like, people should be nicer, people should be more helpful, people should be more polite. It's like when you go to, the DMV or something, and they take forever, and you're like, they should have a better system, okay? And that just makes us frustrated and angry. And if it's somebody we love, for example, like, my mom should be more understanding, okay? Then you feel guilty because you feel that you are criticizing that person. But then you turn it inwards and becomes, I should take better care of my health. I should exercise more. I should go to the gym,
Inshallah.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the proof of the fact that this is, a wrong way to think is that nobody eats healthy, nobody goes to the gym, okay? And saying people should be nicer doesn't really help us at all, because most of the time people are just doing what makes them feel good, not what makes you feel good, okay?
So already we have a bit of a special Faisal approach, psychodynamic, analytical, whatever. The interesting storytelling mode of kind of thinking a few steps forward, but let's take it a couple of steps back, and because shoulds are about belief systems as far as I like to see it or explain it, and your belief systems tell you what the world is and how it should work.
Yeah.
And you did make reference to this before. You kind of learn all your shoulds by the time you're 7 or 9, or
exactly
in childhood, basically.
Yeah.
And then you grow as an adult through those shoulds. Some of them stick, some of them change with time, and really the therapy work, let's say, would be massaging those shoulds with questions like why, when, how.
Exactly.
Or using other methods to just basically change the shoulds. Yeah.
Exactly, and intellectually we kind of know that the shoulds are an ideal or a fantasy or a search for perfection that you're never going to get, but emotionally we still feel we still feel bad about it. It's what we also call the fallacy of fairness, is that even though we've always been told, oh no, you can't do that because life, and you're like, it's not fair, and your mom is like, because life isn't fair, okay? Really, when we were put in that position, we feel bad as if we're like a powerless child. So this just makes us so angry and frustrated with the world. We feel as if, yeah, I know that life isn't fair, but why isn't it fair? Okay, when really you should be thinking, yeah, it's not fair. Let's find a way for it to be more fair to my side. Okay, or let's find a way for it to actually, for me to do something with the understanding that life isn't fair, but I'm gonna try to find a nice little life hack around it.
Okay.
Okay.
So you did mention the first word, fallacy,
Mm-hmm.
not fallacy as I used to say it. Thank you
Yes.
for the correction. Still fallacy to me.
Thank you, Google Translate and Google, dictionary, because otherwise you'd still be calling fallacy.
Yeah. And so let's drive that back to a bigger concept of the cognitive bias, because I think that requires a little bit of explanation, not too much. Cognition is thinking, and bias is the idea of perspective and how you can see things from different perspectives. And when you look from one perspective, if you have a relative blind spot, and you look from another perspective, it's a different relative blind spot.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective. And we use bias, for example, in research. So, for example, if I use based on my practice, the number of, so how many, mentally ill people there are, it's literally 100%. But the bias here is that the 100% of people who would come to my clinic would have mental health issues. Why else are they here? So that's a bias. That's a way for you to kind of fiddle with the numbers or to convince yourself something. It's like, oh, don't go to the hospital. My uncle died in the hospital. I'm like, yeah, that's why he went to the hospital, because he was dying. Okay, so it's these generalizations where you don't notice that there's a reason why this thing happens to you again and again and again. And the reason why we discussed this in the first place was because a lot of what we do is what I call pattern recognition. Okay, but you call it...
So I do the same. I would call it pattern recognition, and it comes from explaining the brain as a pattern matching organism.
True.
Creating and matching, basically. So
Yeah.
you have triggers in the environment, and it fires off a couple of nerves and body processes, bringing up memories and experiences and expectations, which are a bit different from memories. They're kind of future oriented.
Yeah.
And they're extremely biased information.
Yeah.
And the bias is separated into the biological bias itself. So your receivers of information, the 5 sensory systems, your sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch,
which are all
limited
not
naturally.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. They're all not that accurate. Like, it drives me insane when I see movies or TV shows where they're like, can you draw a sketch of the perp? And I'm like, no, I barely remember what he was wearing. Okay, so yeah, we can make anything into a memory. I love the fact that we live in a fluid chemical bath of, neurons and other chemical ways of kind of, imprinting memories, but every one of us thinks somehow that is digital or something. Like, it just works that way. Like, they've never had a corrupted hard drive, but they think our hard drive works perfectly. When really, we kind of make the memory out of, as he says, we've already kind of pattern recognized, like every pattern goes into a box. So we're like, I remember that this person looked like that pattern in the head, that pattern in the face, that pattern in the... But sometimes you can be completely wrong, in the wrong library even. Sorry.
And actually, I'll draw back on a conversation, because the point I wanted to drive through was that these things are structural and biological in nature. They're not pure thinking logical errors like you would tend to think they are. Like, oh, I'm not stupid. It's actually the fact that you're smart. It's the fact that your brain works to give you shortcuts to understand things. So tilqut asra, or
Exactly.
you kind of get it faster. And
Yeah.
and the pattern matching mechanism is a inherently sloppy mechanism.
Yeah.
And I use the word sloppy, not faulty. Because some types of sloppy are faulty and other types are not. And a good example to begin with, let's say, is the baby and the suckling reflex. So it's a sloppy mechanism. You put anything in its mouth and it will start to suckle, and
True.
it's designed for breast milk and feeding the baby.
Yeah.
So if it starts suckling, for example, on I don't know, a toe of a foot, you can call that a faulty pattern match by the brain.
Exactly.
But if it starts suckling on the teat of a bottle of milk, for example, still fulfilling that nutrition, then you would call that an inherently sloppy pattern matching mechanism designed to learn and evolve.
I just won 10 dirhams by forcing him to say the word teat.
Okay.
That was my little post-hypnotic suggestion there.
So basically, to drive it in, cognitive biases are a real thing, and they're a necessity of thinking.
True.
Right. And so the fallacy that you brought up first, do you remember which one? Kind of slipped my mind. I thought it was gonna catch it.
We talked about Fallacy of Fairness.
Okay.
Okay. There are also control fallacies. There is more than one fallacy actually, but yeah, those are the two that I kind of specifically like to kind of mention, although that would be in a completely other video. But that's why I would rather we go to the pattern recognition element of it, because to me the shoulds is one of those things that I actually learned through working with Nasser. It's the way we can actually reframe something by, first the thing I do is I literally stop the patient and I'm like, can you repeat what you said? I just want you to hear it in your head a little bit. I want to hear it out loud again, because there's the problem. This is the self-fulfilling prophecy, okay? It's like, I should not fail, all right? Well, the only person who's in charge of you failing or not failing is usually you, okay? If you do, then you did this to yourself, okay? And that's why a lot of what we do is reframing and making them aware that this is what they do, that they already make it so that what they want to do is such a idealistic, perfectionistic, impossible thing, so that even while they're saying it, they're failing, okay? Best example we use is, I should go to the gym 5 times a day. Try 1 a day. Like 1 a day. Sorry, five times a week. Okay, or every day of the week. At least start with 1 day a week. Okay, because if you say to yourself something along the lines of "I should go every day," guess what? Nobody goes every day. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't go every day. The Rock doesn't go every day. Okay.
So besides loving how personal that example actually is, you already mentioned in your sentence, sort of the difference between should and want. And I don't want to skip to that part where I would say the trick therapeutically is to think of what you want to do rather than what you should do. Yeah. And the differences between pain and pleasure. But I want to, stick to the idea of the fallacies and what a cognitive bias may be. Right? So the fairness fallacy is basically the idea that people should be fair to each other, or that they are fair to each other.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you could see it as naivety, basically.
Sometimes it's much more insidious, though. Sometimes
it's much more insidious because there's the fallacy of fairness, the one that's personally directed. So I believe I'm fair and being fair at any one time.
Yeah.
And then there's I believe people are being fair to each other, and then there's that relationship directly to me.
Exactly.
And from hypnosis, there's the idea of the 4-step reframe. So it's my opinion of myself, people's opinion of me, what I think that opinion is, and what I would like it to be.
And all of those things never match, by the way. So we try to kind of show people how completely different their view of the world is as compared to how other people view it, and how other people would view the response to it as well. That's, the other factors that he's mentioning here. So most people find it very difficult. Like even Hitler thought he was doing an amazing job and helping human race, and and hopefully one day he would retire and paint, okay, but with most probably Goebbels. But the point is, nobody really likes being the bad guy. Nobody likes being told that they're being unfair. So our self-image of us being fair is a little bit one of those things that gets us into trouble, because sometimes we make mistakes, and everyone, I think, would have some kind of version of that experience where the person who refuses to admit that they're wrong. Okay, and that's very much a cognitive distortion that affects you and affects them, because they become completely, unpleasant to be around, and you get so frustrated and angry, and at the same time, you're like, why can't you just admit that you did something wrong? Okay, but...
So I do have a comment on that.
Yeah.
And I'll draw upon one of the favorite quotations in Arabic I know by, I think it was a Shafi'i, but it doesn't matter, the words stand, رأيي صواب يحتمل الخطأ ورأيك خطأ يحتمل الصواب. And the quick translation is, my opinion is correct, and it may be wrong, and your opinion is wrong, and it may be correct. And I find that a little genius play of words that makes a lot of sense to me, because of a lot of the biases we have. Some people kind of find it not PC to say things like I'm confident in what I'm saying, or to defend their position. There's a lot of training and assertiveness that you can do to help you kind of come to that at least communication style. But it makes perfect sense to me. I'm like, if you're not sure of the information, why on earth are you opening your mouth to begin with? I mean, specifically in an argument context or a negotiation context, let's say. And sure, there's the idea that the biases do shift and turn moment to moment, and that the beauty of that communication is that you can massage your biases around and work it out.
True.
Right, but I've even been asked, how can you remove cognitive bias or minimize it? And I chose to focus on minimize it because you cannot remove cognitive bias.
You don't want to remove cognitive bias, okay? Mm-hmm. Because the matter of fact is, the truth of the matter is, there is positive things that come out of cognitive bias, okay? So that son of a diddly who you can't stand and is evil and horrible, and you're like, why is this person alive? The cognitive bias that allows you to tell yourself, well, maybe I'm not 100% correct. Maybe I'm, not looking at the full picture. Maybe there's a reason why that person is that way. Is the reason that we as human beings have not killed each other like eons ago. It's the concept of us being able to reframe anything, because despite what people think, and they really push for that, okay, whatever they think is an objectively correct thing is usually the most subjectively correct thing. So whatever it is, and I think both in your practice and my practice, we have always been able to do what we call reframing, which is that whatever hard and fast rule a patient comes in to explain why he's feeling unhappy, we're like, wait a sec, but from my point of view, this situation that you're talking about was actually, you could see it as this way. It's the glass is half full, glass is half empty dichotomy. They're both correct. And no situation, in my experience, I'm not sure if you agree or not, sorry, but yeah, no situation in my experience cannot be seen in two completely opposing and different perspectives.
So let's get into the cognitive biases a little bit to kind of illustrate what kind of things we're talking about. I mean, you look up a list of cognitive biases on Wikipedia. I think you're up to a list of 157 these days. The numbers change. These are concepts and they're linguistically described differently, and then specific situations and contexts have specific nomenclatures. But the two basic ones, I think I remember from theory of knowledge. So you have the confirmation bias, and then you have the falsification bias. And really I'm drawing upon the falsification method of research versus the confirmatory method of research and the differences in bias between them.
Okay.
So the idea is with the confirmation bias is when you go out looking for something, you're going to find it. And the idea with the falsification bias is, it's the same thing when you're looking out to find something, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
But the idea is false until proven true. Yeah. Which is so much harder to do because any small evidence against the fact kind of makes it not true.
It's like, is this like, one of the things I say about depression to my patients is, depression is a wonderful trickster. Because when you're depressed, it makes you feel as if you've always been depressed, and then tries to look around for other things to reinforce this concept of that the world is depressing and will continue to depressing, that life is crap and then you die. Okay? And I'm like, yeah, because in a day, like 100 things happen. And if you just focus on the 50, and usually it's really 50-50. If you focus on the 50 unpleasant things, then you're always going to think that life is just completely unpleasant. While there must have been 50 good things that happened that day, you just did not notice. And it builds, it's like a domino effect. You start in the morning and you're like, oh crap, my alarm clock didn't go off, I'm already 10 minutes late for work. Okay, and the 10 minutes late for work is, oh, I didn't have my breakfast. And then getting breakfast makes you unhappy because there was a line waiting and then you forgot your wallet in the office and they had to go back. Okay, during all that time, I'm quite sure other things have happened that, like somebody was like, oh, I'm sorry that you missed your place in the line, go in front of me, but you're not going to remember that at all. Okay, you are really looking for things to prove your point, and that's the falsification bias. Sometimes when you're looking for results so badly and you want them so badly, you are going to fiddle with the facts a little bit just to make it fit what you want to get. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I guess while you were talking, I made a better formulation of what I was trying to say. I do agree, though, And the idea is maybe when I said these are the ultimate biases, I should have said those are the perspectives that you look through.
Yeah.
And they're the beginnings of biases. So what I meant with confirmation bias is you tend to confirm your own experiences, and that's by looking for the meaning in them, and when that's regardless of positive or negative meaning. And then falsification bias is when you tend to falsify the experiences of others, and that's another way of confirming your own kind of experiences, but it's specifically different.
Yeah.
So a couple of cool social experiments I remember, it was, so you're more likely to view someone else as wrong when they commit a sin than you are to view yourself as wrong.
Or as I call the backseat driver syndrome.
The attribution error.
Yeah.
Right? When it's something wrong, it's like more possible for other people than for me. When it's something good, I'm more likely to have done it.
Yeah.
And you know, simple kind of fixing that attribution error, kind of helping people see through different lenses, sort of to see how perhaps there are other options to this equation, can really help go a long way, especially if they're still communicating with that person, or through a quick forgiveness process, let's say, letting go of the weight of the past. But you have the attribution error, and help me out with any of them. I mean, spit out a fallacy that you like to deal with. You said fallacy of control. So you have the locus of control, and you can have the bias or the belief that things are in your control or things are out of your control. That's internal locus versus external locus of control.
True.
And it really biases your kind of understanding of things.
But wait a second, I don't want this to be too intellectual.
Okay. All right.
Like, go down a little bit, because I find that this is how we kind of get through. Nasser doesn't sound like this with actual patients, by the way. So he's actually much more able to explain this stuff to them, but his terminology is bizarre beyond belief. Okay, the clown thing, honestly, I'm like, I didn't even have a clown phobia until I heard that. I read it as a child, watched the miniseries and the movie, okay, and it still creeps me out every time he's like, make clown noises. I'm like, what the hell? But yeah, so he doesn't do this, and I want to kind of bring this down to the level of people who can, understand it from how we explain it to people. So all these fallacies are available, and it's not just the fact that you change the way that other people do things or your perspective of them to make you feel better. It's the opposite that I deal with in my practice as well. It's the people who tend to falsify actual events just to justify feeling guilty about something, right?
That happens plenty too. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's the I told this person that they're a bad person because they did this, this, and this, and I'm like, yeah, makes sense to me. That sounds like a bad person to me. Okay, but I'm like, but maybe I pushed him. Maybe, I was asking for it. Maybe I just pushed his buttons. I shouldn't have confronted him with this, or I shouldn't have confronted her with that. And I'm like, no, it still seems very black and white to me. Okay, it seems like blah, 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 blah. You lost an arm? That's a bad person. That's somebody you should avoid. Okay.
I mean, there's that, and then there's the classic in relationships, you're useless, you're never going to change, and you've never even tried, and you won't ever listen to me.
And guess what? He's going to be useless, never going to change, and is never going to ever listen to you.
Or when you're when you're in a depressive state, let's say, and it's been a while since you've been up and chirpy, and it's how you've been talking, and then I ask you, for example, because I do all the time, give me 5 signs of great change, and then well, I had a nice chat, but and that but is like a big but. But is a word that erases everything that came before it.
Like Sir Mix-a-Lot would actually move countries just for that but.
Yeah. I like that one. I like big butts, and I cannot lie.
Yeah.
But but is a word that kind of just erases everything and focuses and zones in on the next kind of part of that sentence. So you'd have people go like, oh, I was having a great time, but, and then just after the but, it's like a but, a big but,
a humongous but.
Okay. And it's a falsification thing. It tends to feel like, or sound like, at least on one level or another, like disqualifying everything that you just said. So it was a little nice, but life still sucks. I don't see where this is going. It's not. What's the point?
And
it's never going to happen again.
That's what drives us crazy as therapists. This is what we call undoing. Okay, where they give you the 5. In his case, I actually like that method, but I don't do this literal. But the point is, they come in, you give them homework, and they come in the next week, and the homework is, they're like, no, didn't do it, I didn't have time. And I'm like, so what did you do? They're like, I did this, this, and this. I'm like, well, 3 of those count as your homework. What? I didn't even know. Okay, when really that's my point of trying to tell them that even if you're not focusing on doing what I told you to do, which is usually something to kind of make you feel better or make you feel less anxious or whatever, okay, in a day, out of the 100 things that have happened to you, there must have been 3 or 4 times where, you know, even a broke clock is right twice a day. So something must have happened. And if I can literally show you event after event after event, what you're building really is an inventory, a list of things that make you feel better. And if you actually just focus on those, all right, okay, again, I'm being very, very literal here because I want to show you that the mind sometimes does respond to this, and we kind of, it's so easy, and that's why when he just takes something and externalizes it in hypnotherapy and tell them move it around and so on, the mind is that literal. It doesn't like ambiguity.
I must say it was both touching and traumatizing how you recount some of the things I share with you. But that's why I love you. So, back on point. So,
Yes.
don't shoot yourself to death.
Yep.
Right.
If I would give it like a nice summary, it's don't shoot yourself to death. There are no hard and fast rules in life except what you put on yourself. Okay? So whatever you think should be done, trust me, there are many cultures around the world that will be like, oh my god, that's so offensive to us. Okay? It's like carnations in Europe are supposed to be for like dead people. Okay? So no hard and fast rules in life. Okay? And the better way of kind of looking at it is not I should, but I hope, I think I can, maybe that could happen, all right? So kind of try to make it so that you're not dealing with perfection all the time. You're not dealing with an ideal that you're never going to reach. So even if you get there, you're not going to be happy. And that's the worst feeling in the world. When you think that you've achieved all that you need to achieve for you to finally feel, you know, like all the shoulds have been met, you're always going to realize that that's not what you wanted anyway.
So, because of the way my mind works, I've already went into 6 tangential issues, but also I remembered I sat like this for a reason. I can only maintain guru position for about 20 minutes, and we promised not to go too much out of...
Yeah, it's like the Native American alarm clock. He's either going to sit like this or have a lot of water until he needs to pee before this video ends.
Yeah. So I'll take a shot at the same idea, don't shoot yourself to death.
Mm-hmm.
And
remember we mentioned the dissociation thing that you do in your therapy.
yes, absolutely. One of the reasons I love a hypnotic
Trance?
Intervention,
Okay.
you know, with a loose definition, is because there's a necessary dissociation that you kind of run your client through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the ability to view things from different points.
Yep.
And it can be far more literal than you can ever imagine. It's acting out, or it can be totally fantastical in your mind. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mind is both literal and metaphorical.
True.
Which is why I like don't shoot yourself to death. I even keep kind of want to saying don't shoot yourself to death. And,
Exactly.
And the idea is that you have built your presuppositions, your shoulds. This is what the world is, and this is how it should work.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a specific difference between should language and want language. And
Exactly.
I want to draw upon that because the simple linguistic change, if you accept it with a bit of explanation, and that's what I'll try to do here, is that when you want to do something, the thing at the end of that is naturally a reward.
Yeah.
It is that sense of achievement that you have fulfilled.
True.
Right? Stepping stones, tick boxes, trophies, call it what you want, stickers on a wall.
Yeah.
But that sense of achievement, there's a deep system within you that is kind of primal, and it's the one that's designed to be tickled, so to speak. It keeps you going.
True.
Incremental change and towards a goal, serving a higher purpose, let's say, or meaning. And your should, I should do this, and I should do this is more duty, is more responsibility, it's far heavier.
Yeah.
And the heaviness kind of draws back to the anxiety thing we talked about the last time, because as your anxiety builds about all the things that should be happening and are not, I mean, the only reason you're mentioning the shoulds is because they are not happening.
Exactly.
Right? Or not to par, or not to your personal standards.
Mm-hmm.
And as
Which
the
is,
anxiety...
as I said, is just a fantasy of perfection, or achieving perfection, even though we all intellectually know that nobody's perfect. But we still try to strive for it. And sometimes we overshoot the mark so much that we're so overwhelmed. And what is the immediate reaction to any anxiety?
It's freeze. It's freeze and literally feel stuck and overwhelmed and be hypersensitive to everything, so that, you know, suddenly instead of the 4 things in your mind, there's your whole life running through the whole time.
Exactly.
And it's a stress, it's an overload technically to your conscious mind, and you can go into a hypnotic state naturally and start to create all sorts of weird shit in your life, specifically body pains and things like that.
Yeah.
Speaking of body pains, what I wanted to close with, I guess, is
the fact that you have body pains right now?
Yeah, the position has gone through to its maximum, I guess.
Yeah. Whatever's left blood's left in his head has been squeezed out at this point.
Fully.
By the way, all therapies and all pop psychology kind of follow the same basic concept with achieving things, which is make it a step-by-step goal. So if you're wondering why The Secret is such an amazing revelation, but we as therapists were like, yeah, we already do that. And cognitive distortions is more CBT, so it's literally, no, break it down to the smallest step, no, then the smaller step. All The Secret did was it added a vision board, so you have both a visual and literal sense of what are the steps that you need to take to achieve your goal. But as I said before, and as Nasser is saying now, it's a domino effect. You literally push the first one, then you have to actually admit that this is an achievement, and that's where you get stumped, right? It's like when you're trying to tell them 5 things and they're like, yeah, but that's not an achievement. That's what I do every day. Massaging that perspective and opening it up is one skill that you necessarily need in conversation. Like that is a very highly targeted kind of type of conversation. There's no if and maybe and but. That is the outcome we're having. Yeah.
But since you mentioned The Secret, that is how I sort of wanted to close, because bias is necessary. And what you should be doing is paying a lot of attention to the idea that there is such a thing as the theory of attraction, and what you focus on most tends to realize.
Yeah.
And that is whether you focus on positive outcomes, negative outcomes, obstacles, or utility. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is how your mind works. It seizes one way or another.
Yeah, which is why we're not against biases, but we're really about, as I said, pattern recognition. You need to be able to identify when you're distorting or you're creating a bias or creating something that is unachievable, because that just frustrates you and makes you demotivated and makes you avoid to do the thing completely.
And it confirms the situation, the diagnosis that you have.
Exactly, sort of, which is I'm a useless person.
Right.
So yeah.
Or whatever you happen to think, basically.
Yeah.
So the cognitive biases, basically, I mean, they're there for a purpose. It's it draws back to heuristics or making shortcuts in ways of thinking, so that you don't waste resources and time figuring out things you've already figured out before. Basically.
So in other words, life hacks.
Life hacks. Yep.
Okay.
And what I like from some of my faster EFT training is the explanation of a human being as a trance monkey. So you're just going around entranced by all the signals around you, acting automatically.
So it's not a monkey who's had a sex change, is what you're saying. I was like, what the hell is a trans monkey?
No, a trance monkey.
Okay.
But fair enough. I mean, I'm sure we can work that into a metaphor one day.
I'm quite sure if we did, it will be very, very, very bizarre and might be the title of our new book.
Let's agree to a project, I guess.
Transmonkeyonomics.
Basically, we're trans monkeys, and we go around and we're triggered by all these events, and we kind of go into these automatic thought patterns and behavior patterns. And a lot of the times, we will give excuses for the ways we behaved. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have done this because
all the wonderful things he does for us.
He does. Can't help myself sometimes. It's just a thinking process.
Which is weird, because I don't think he's ever actually seen The Wizard of Oz.
I did, with the yellow root and everything, like 6 or 12 times on VHS.
Okay, this is exactly my point. That is what is known as screen memory. Remember how we talked about how sometimes you can falsify even your memory?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm quite sure he has never actually sat through the entire film from beginning to end because it's boring as hell and that is why it flopped. Same thing with Cinderella. We know the Cinderella, we know the Seven Dwarfs. Sorry, not Cinderella, sorry, Snow White. We know Snow White, the evil queen, the Seven Dwarfs. Try sitting through that movie.
I don't know about you. I watched all those movies and I paid 100% attention.
He thinks he does, but he was a child and
I
he was probably
even
playing with
Snow
the toy.
White for a while, or Prince Charming. I'm not sure which one. I'm pretty sure I watched it enough times to do each and every character on that one.
Snow White was one of them? How is it that you ended up with Dopey?
Moving on.
Doc.
Moving on. Back. So cognitive biases, they're a real thing. They're not a bad thing. There's a point to them.
Yep.
But they do, the design is to distort the way you think.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically the reason why nothing we know is actually a copy of what happened or real in any way, shape, or form, other than it did happen, and it's therefore utility.
Yeah.
And understanding your cognitive biases, which is as simple as a Wikipedia search, really, just reading about them a little bit. And
I use the same thing from the internet, which is 15 most common cognitive distortions, and it just prints them out. And as I'm showing them to my patients, the patients are like, oh, I have that. I'm like, it's the 15 most common ones. As he said, they're up to 115 by now.
157 last time
157 the last time he checked.
A couple of years ago.
Okay, so I'm like, I'm giving you the most common ones. Why wouldn't you have them?
And they're natural and they make sense. And really, you're not required to change them except for the fact of learning, expanding your consciousness, let's say.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself to react to similar situations differently in the future.
Yeah.
And that is basically programming a new pattern and deprogramming an old pattern.
Yeah.
And you can call it hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, you can call it batif if you like.
Batif is good.
Just remember, every day in every way it gets better and better. So thanks for following.
And don't shoot yourself to death.
Don't shoot yourself to death.